Hello, you're muted, Drew.
Hi, Kathleen. How are you?
Good, good. Are you all set for
I am.
everything?
I am. Yep.
Okay, great. Um, let's see, I think Sharon is going to be the facilitator, but if she doesn't get here, I can do it.
Okay. Sounds
Do you
good.
need, do you need rooms or anything?
No, I have my presentation ready to go. I'm just going to share my screen and
Okay,
just get going as soon as
all
we get.
right, all right. So I will make you a co-host, so you
Okay.
can do that.
Sounds good.
All right, there you are.
And
You're all set.
how do these normally go in terms of questions? Do people ask questions as the presentation goes on? Should I wait till the end? Is it my preference?
Yes, it's your preference. You can just, a lot of times people will ask questions when something comes up.
Okay.
They could also put them in the little chat screen,
Okay.
but it's hard to watch that and talk and do
Yeah.
everything at the same time. So if one of us sees something there and you need to address it, we'll do that. But you can encourage them to do whatever they want. They can unmute themselves
Sure. Okay.
anytime.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. I didn't know if they had the power to do that, but I'm glad that they do so that they can ask questions.
Yes, yes. They come in muted, but they can unmute themselves.
Okay. Sounds
And
good.
also people people don't have to sign up ahead of time, so people might drop in or out or whatever.
Okay.
And so we've had pretty stable arrangements with people, but it's just, or they might turn their like I don't have my video on here.
Yep.
Anyway, they might turn their video off because they're just like tired. I don't know. Do you have a
Yeah.
lot of experience using Zoom?
Yep.
Use it in your class?
Yes. Well, I mean, I got very familiar with it this past spring, so I know it pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah, good, good.
Although I'm not as versed with the whole breakout rooms, we haven't necessarily used that in my role as a counselor, but I
Yes.
do know that exists, but I don't think we necessarily need that for today.
Yes, well, it's pretty simple. What happens is that the host can designate breakout rooms, and we could take people and divide them up evenly and say, we want to, you can randomly assign them. In this case, we randomly assign people because there's no, in a class, you might want to assign certain people to certain places. But it's automatic, and then the host can close the breakout rooms when they want to. So
Okay.
okay. Now, as a co-host, you can post any sharing screen things, and
Okay.
you can use polls.
Okay.
So that's at the bottom of the screen. If you're
Yeah.
going to do that.
I don't think I'll need that for
Okay.
today.
Tell
Yeah.
me something. Have you used polls in your class?
I mean, as a counselor, I haven't
Oh,
necessarily needed
okay.
to.
Okay. I'm
But
sorry.
maybe, no, that's okay. Maybe this fall, that's something that I can incorporate into our lessons with juniors and seniors. But at this point, I haven't necessarily needed to.
Yeah.
But maybe it will be useful as we go forward into the fall.
Well, you could do polls that are like, how are you feeling right now, or things
Yeah.
like that. Or you could do polls that are more oriented toward, whatever chemistry or history or whatever.
Yep.
So answering a question.
Okay.
So you're a guidance counselor?
I am at Kristen Vanderveen School.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
Kristen asked me to do this. We did a similar presentation to our faculty, I think last year or the year before. So
Mhm.
she asked me to kind of do something similar, but I wanted to get more into the COVID stuff as how it pertains to admissions this year and with
Oh,
teachers.
yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to get into that, not just specifically talk about the recommendations. It leads into that. So
Yes, yes. Well, you can tell people what you're gonna do, and
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, no, that's nice. That's nice. It's funny. I taught high school for many years, and I was administrator as well, but um, I teach. I'm an adjunct at one of the local colleges now in Rhode Island, and sometimes people will ask me for a recommendation, but it's very hard sometimes unless I've had them for a couple of classes.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Yep. Yep. I agree. Even as a counselor, I have roughly 45 to 50 kids on my caseload for seniors, and it's hard to necessarily get to know them. I mean, obviously, some kids better than others, and those recommendations are easier to write.
Yes, yes.
Sometimes even if you do know them well and they don't necessarily do well in school, those can be really tough recommendations to write too.
Well, yeah, Yeah, it's true.
So
Ugh.
it's, I feel you. Yeah, it's a challenging process.
No, it is. Usually it's for a job or for a program
Yeah.
or for something where they want to spend the summer doing whatever and want to be selected. So
Yeah.
usually it's only the students I know a little better. Otherwise, why would they ask me,
Yeah.
So anyway,
Um,
people should be coming in
okay.
shortly. The one thing about Zoom, it doesn't have a running time here. And I wish it did.
Yeah.
Because you can never tell how long, what time it is or how long you've been. You got to time it separately.
Yep.
So we'll wait a little bit.
Okay.
People are at lunch break. So, okay.
Yeah. So should we get started right at 1:15 or should we wait a few minutes for people to get settled?
I think we should wait a few minutes, especially since it's after lunch.
Yeah. All right.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
So,
Good.
all right.
And this is the third day of the conference, so I'm assuming that that fatigue might be setting in at some point.
Well, yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
hi, sorry.
Hi.
Hold on.
Sharon, you think fatigue is setting in?
I think so. I actually just rushed back over here to get on this session because I fell asleep at lunch. So, yeah, I think it is. It's tiring,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, can you help me get these to hook up? I'm sorry. So
No,
Drew,
we're all
I'm the
set.
host for your meeting.
Yep.
I'm just trying to get my earbuds going. Oh, yes.
Okay.
We're all set, Sharon. No problem. I'll make you co-host.
Okay. Awesome.
I'll make both of you co-host actually. Or you can be the host. Oh, you are co-host. All right. So.
Should be going through. That's strange.
Maybe I just need to restart my computer. Oh, well.
So Drew, on Monday, it was really, I was so exhausted by the end of the day. That was our first day and
Yeah.
we hadn't done this before. So it was like, wow.
Yeah.
Everything's so fast.
Yeah. But even when it's an in-person conference and it's at the end of the day, everybody is just worn out,
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
and what time does it go until today?
About 3:30.
Okay. So we're getting down to the end here. So
Yeah, we are. You're not the last. You're let's see, 2:15, and then after you, there's a discussion about running in-person lab experiments.
yep. Okay.
So, okay, but
All right. Sounds good.
so you have about an hour. And-
Oh, go ahead, Kathy.
Oh no, it's all right. Go ahead.
So Drew, if you want to do breakout groups or anything, or if you want me to monitor the chat, I'm happy to do that for you.
Okay, sounds good. I was thinking about how I'm going to do the questions, and I think I'm just going to have people ask questions as we go through. I have a slide at the end for questions, but I think, there could be questions that people are thinking of in the moment. It might be better to talk about in the moment. So I think we'll
Okay.
and people can just unmute themselves and go from there.
Okay.
I don't think I'll take the full hour. I hope that that's okay. I'm assuming that the fatigue is setting in, so hopefully people are okay with that. But maybe it will take the full hour if there's a lot of questions.
Usually we, even if you don't go the full hour, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of question and answer period.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
All right, so should we go ahead and get started?
Sure.
It's just after time. So welcome everyone. I'm Sharon Geyer and I'm the host for the meeting today. It's the third afternoon of day 3 and I hope everyone's still feeling ready to learn, still eager to learn more. You must be because you're still here. I'm very excited for Drew's talk today because I don't know about you, but I teach juniors and I teach AP Chem. So I basically write a letter for everybody. So I'm hoping to get some inspiration because I got to get going on this project next week. So I'll introduce you to our speaker, Drew Skrocki. Is that right?
Skrocki,
Drew
yeah.
Skrocki has been a school counselor at the Bromfield School in Harvard, Mass. for the past 10 years. That's where Kristen works, right?
That's correct.
You guys work together? Yeah.
Yeah.
Drew specifically works with students in grades 10 through 12 in the college search and application processes. Drew has also worked with teachers on crafting letters of recommendation for these students. So Thank you, Drew. And if you all have questions, you're welcome to unmute yourself and just chime in. Or if you want to put questions in the chat, I'll keep an eye on that as we go. All right. So, Kathy, did you make Drew a co-host?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you want to share your screen, go ahead, and you should be able to do that.
All right, sounds good. I'm going to share my screen now. All right. All right, can everybody see that okay? All right. Okay, so my name is Drew Skrocki. I'm a school counselor at the Bromfield School. I've been working with Kristen Vanderveen over the past 10 years, and we had done a similar presentation at the Bromfield School, and she asked me to come forward and do a similar presentation. So I took that presentation, but I also wanted to incorporate some of the updates with COVID and with admissions, and I had talked to a number of my colleagues in the admissions world just to try to get an update as to what's going on, what they're seeing, and try to incorporate that into my presentation today. So I'd like to continue with that. So as you have questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and just ask that question. Here's the outline. So I'm going to do a brief introduction, give an admissions update, then talk about the difference between the counselor and the teacher letter of recommendation, then get into specifics about science teacher recommendations and specifically what some of my colleagues in the admissions world had to say. Then talk about some COVID specifics in those recommendations, tips for getting started, do's and don'ts, structure and format of recs. And then I put some resources in here that I find helpful that I've passed along to teachers at Bromfield too. And then we have time for more questions at the end. I can also get into Naviance or the Common App if people have questions on that, but I'll save that till the end. But please feel free to ask your questions as we move along. So I started at the Bromfield School back in the fall of 2010. I've been working with students on the college application process, in the admissions process for the last 10 years. Just a little bit of background about the Bromfield School. 90+% of our students go on to a wide range of four-year colleges. We use Naviance as a school for the whole college application process, sending documents, uploading recommendations, transcripts. So I'm well-versed in that. The majority of our students do apply for early action deadlines, but we do have a number of students that do apply for other deadlines as well. So specifically about COVID at our school this past spring, just like you guys, we went virtual. Our grades were pass-fail for this past spring, which has caused a lot of anxiety for our students as we've moved into the application process for our juniors who are now going to be seniors. But we've been very upfront, and I think what's nice is that colleges have had a theme of flexibility and understanding for this upcoming admission season, which I'll talk about. The GPA for our students will include grade 9, grade 10, the first semester of grade 11, and that's all that will be used in terms of applying for the students in the fall, unless they're applying for a later deadline in the late winter, early spring. In this coming fall, we are going to be in a hybrid model for our students. So just a little background there. So the admissions update, I think you have all heard of a little virus called COVID, and it's definitely wreaked havoc for everyone, especially at the college level and the high school level. What we're seeing now is that there's a changing of landscape in the admissions process and at the college level. We're seeing students looking at college in a different light. What we're seeing now is that this particular junior class, who is now going to be a senior, they're behind in the process. A lot of students haven't been able to take the SAT or ACT. They haven't been able to see colleges and visit them. So they are looking behind at this time. And a number of my colleagues have expressed that. They're available to help these students as much as possible, and they're ready and willing to reach out to students, and they're willing to accept any communication from students at this time to try to help them, because these colleges do realize that these students are behind in the process. We're also seeing the effect of deferrals, or we're about to see the effect of deferrals on the admissions process. What deferrals are, for those people that aren't familiar, it's when a student chooses to postpone their attendance of college for a year. So you can a lot of times do that for 1 year. Some colleges will let you extend your admission for a year or 2 years. And at that point, you can apply to other colleges during that year. But you do have to put a deposit down to have a deferral of your acceptance. Now, with this senior class that just graduated, for those students that are deferring, that could potentially play and wreak havoc on the upcoming junior class and who's moving on to be a senior, as to how selective the process and is going to be for them and how many number of spots are available. I think what is nice that the colleges have said is that they're still looking to accept students. They still need to fill classes. There are some colleges that are still going to the wait list or still accepting applications, which we haven't necessarily really seen in the past. So there are a lot of changes, and price point has become a big factor here. With the economy and how things have changed this past spring, I think price will play heavily into students' choices this coming fall and this coming spring. Like I said, the theme for this year with admissions is going to be flexibility and understanding. They're not going to hold a student for any changes that a school has gone through. So for example, for our school, we've gone pass fail. It's not going to harm a student the fact that we've gone pass fail. They're flexible. They're understanding in what's happening across the board in college and high school. They know that most schools have gone virtual for this past spring, so they know sort of what's happening out there. But it's great that they're going to be flexible and understanding with that. Because many students haven't been able to sit down for the SAT and ACT this past spring and summer, most colleges have now gone test optional. So what does this all mean? So without the SAT and ACT for students, colleges are going to have to dive more into the other parts of the application. So things don't necessarily really change for a test optional college or a test required for a test optional college. So test optional colleges don't require the SAT and ACT. You can submit them if you want to, but you don't have to. So things aren't necessarily changing there for those particular colleges. But now for the test required, where colleges have relied specifically on the SAT and ACT to really look at students across a level playing field and see how they compare to other students, they now have to find new ways of doing that. Most colleges do have a holistic review process, but now these colleges that were test required and are now test optional, they have to go more holistic and look at the student as a whole and dive deeper into those parts of the student's applications. In terms of review, some colleges use outside readers. Sometimes they use faculty. Sometimes they do it as a team. They do it individually. It really depends on the college. And at some colleges, it's going to change a lot, and they're going to take things more in-house in terms of the admissions offices, and they're going to really rely on this more on their own and take the driver's seat there. But some colleges really aren't going to change, and they're going to continue the process that has worked for them. So in terms of looking at grades for students and diving deeper into those applications, we're going to really look heavily at a student's fall 2020 grades. And if they had grades for spring 2020, whether that's a pass fail or a grade, they're going to look at that potentially different if it's a pass fail, but they want to see how a student did prior to COVID. And then after COVID, they're really going to look at the fall of 2020 in their senior year and see how a student is doing there. If a student is going to be virtual there, it should be upfront in terms of the high school sending out documentation to the college, letting a college know. But everyone has had to make a transition here, whether that's going from virtual this past spring to hybrid or back to virtual again. Everyone's going to have to make a transition. So it's really great if a high school is upfront with a college to let them know how grading has happened, how learning has happened, just so they get an idea of how to look at a student's application. And as these admissions officers dive into the application, they're looking more into that personal fit. And I think that's where recommendations play a big part. They're going to be looking at the counselor recommendation and teacher recommendations more heavily, not just skimming them. A lot of colleges do a holistic review. Some colleges read more into applications than others. Sometimes at the bigger universities, they don't necessarily look at them at all. Sometimes they do. I think it depends on where a student's data lies in terms of their GPA and SAT, but without that SAT or ACT, now they have to look into other parts of the application. So the difference between the counselor letter and the teacher letter of recommendation. So in a counselor letter, we really try to tell their story and paint the picture across the whole across all areas of the student. We talk about their personality, talk about their background, their academics, future endeavors, extracurriculars. A lot of times counselors will take into parent perspective. At the Bromfield School, we have a parent brag sheet that goes out to all parents, and they can contribute to the student's recommendation, or at least we get information from them to add to a student's recommendation. Because a lot of counselors have high caseloads. They may not get to know students as much as they would like, or sometimes there's just stories that never come up in conversation, and parents can really add a nice perspective to an application and recommendation for a student. I think the counselor recommendation is meant to provide a broad view of the student, where teachers serve a different function. The teacher recommendation should be an honest appraisal of a student's academic performance and intellectual promise. They're intended to primarily convey the teacher's classroom experience with the student, to give the college an idea of how the student is likely to perform academically. Additionally, the letter may highlight a student's analytical and critical thinking skills. And that came from the College Board, just to give an idea of what they're looking for in a teacher's letter of recommendation. So for us as counselors, we paint that picture across all areas of the student, and we structure our letters to have an opening. We try to tell a story in the beginning. We talk about their background. We try to talk about, if there's been any factors that have played into their lives that may affect them inside and outside of the classroom. That's part of that story. As colleges review students' applications, they're looking to see a student's story. If when they look at the application, it's all data and facts about the student. They're trying to get a sense of who the student is, what their personality is, what kind of academic level they have. Are they a good fit for a particular college? Are they ready for college? So that's where, as counselors and teachers, we have to try to paint that picture for these colleges. So we talk about their academics. As counselors, we talk about extracurricular activities. And then we close that recommendation and try to at least put one final boost into that rec to say that we're recommending these students for college. As counselors, what we have a hard time talking about is the life inside of the classroom. We can talk about it from a broad perspective, but we don't know necessarily what happens on a daily basis between a student and a teacher. And that's where you guys come into play. That's where it's so important. So for counselors, we have a hard time talking about the student's personality and demeanor through the teacher's eyes. We may know a student on a different level than a teacher does. You guys spend 45, potentially more hours a day with these students that we don't necessarily get to do. So you guys may have a different perspective on the student. We can't talk about the interaction with peers and with the teachers. We can talk about their academic abilities, but I think you can talk more specifically about that, not just how good they are in class. You can talk about their work habits, their engagements in class, their grasp of the material. Are they showing a mastery level of the material that is presented in class? It's important for you to talk about the level of challenge of the course. So if you're teaching AP chemistry and it's the most difficult class in the school, you should put that in your recommendation. As a counselor, I always put that in. If a student did well in this, that's really going to show a college that they're ready for college level academics, and you should feel free to put that in your recommendation. If a student struggled, what did they do when they struggled? Did they self-advocate? Did they seek extra help? What type of intellectual curiosity? What type of questions are they asking in class? Do they take that material, ask the question, and then run with it? What type of future do they have with that material? What do they want to major in college? If they want to major in some sort of STEM field, what does that look like for the student? And also, it's super important. Every college counselor that I talked to talked about anecdotes. They love to hear the personal perspective from the teacher. They want to know about what happens on a daily basis. Those stories really show a student's personality, their work ethic, in a number of different areas. So if you can add anecdotes, that's great. So for science teacher recommendations, depending on the type of college, the science recommendation can play more into that application, especially at a business school, technical college. When I talk to a colleague at Bentley, they love to see recommendations from the science teachers. And obviously I talked to a WPI representative and they said the same thing. What science teachers can talk about is these labs, the project work, especially at WPI where they have a project-based curriculum. They want to see specifics on those labs, the hands-on skills of the students and how they applied that in the classroom. They want you to talk about how they collaborated, how they were a group member within those labs, if they were a group project. That's important for a science teacher to talk about. A counselor can't talk about that. So it would be really great if you could talk about that. It's important to talk about how a student's understanding of the material and foundational concepts in that class, especially if they're looking to major in that STEM field. How did they handle that material? How did they handle those concepts? Does a student ask a deeper question in terms of those concepts? Do they show the critical thinking and that intellectual curiosity? That's what that college is looking for from that science teacher recommendation. Do they show that problem solving ability, especially with that lab? For the student, is it also not about just learning the material in class? It's the application of it and running with that. They want students to demonstrate that deeper learning, but it's hard for them to demonstrate that in their application. And that's why they're looking for that in that science teacher recommendation. They want to see that a student can take a topic and run with it. And they want to see that through the lens of the science teacher. And they want to see potentially an application to life of the material taught in class. You know, specifically, like if there was something about environmental science and a student showed a true passion with that. Can you talk about that through your eyes? And again, talk about the anecdotes within that science class. You know, especially if they're going to be a STEM major, they're really going to look for you to talk about, is this a good fit for them? Do they understand the material? And so the science teacher recommendation can play a bigger factor depending on a student's major. So in terms of specifics for COVID, as far as I know, every school in New England has gone virtual. So a college is understanding of that, but we don't want to really talk the whole rec about being remote. Every student applying had to make a transition to remote if they were from New England. I mean, we can mention this in our recommendations, but we want to talk about how a student adjusted to being remote. If they did well, you can mention that. You know, Johnny did well in his transition to remote, but if Johnny struggled, what happened when Johnny struggled when we went remote? At the Bromfield School, we had a number of students that were very strong in the classroom, and once we went remote, they really struggled. And I think, you know, coming this particular fall, my colleague and I are going to work with our teachers on how to talk about this, because this can be a difficult topic to talk about for teachers. How can a student show that they overcame this challenge? They showed grit, or did they just kind of roll over and just do the bare minimum? That can be a difficult topic to talk about. But if a student did do well during that remote time, did they go above and beyond with their learning? The college still wants to hear about the interaction with peers, if that's possible. You know, did a student go above and beyond when working with the peers? Did they maybe do some tutoring? Did they try to meet with a student after class? You know, something to that effect. If you can talk about that anecdotally, that would be really helpful in terms of that COVID specific for a recommendation. If there was any specifics that you knew about for a student that had an extenuating circumstance, like a parent lost a job, maybe, you know, food was tough, anything anecdotally that you might be able to talk about, I think that would be good. And then there's also a COVID section on the Common application for students to talk about their experience. That section is more for a student to talk about maybe if they didn't do well during virtual learning. That's a spot where they can talk about that. But in my eyes, I think that they've put this into the application because they don't want students writing their essay about what happened during COVID. So they have this specific section on the Common App there. All right, tips for getting started. So my tip for teachers is always start as early as possible. If I know Kristen Vanderveen loves to do hers over the summer, but especially if you get a lot of requests to write your letters of recommendation, the earlier you can start, the better. It's a great idea for teachers to have questionnaires that they can give out to their students, whether that's a Google form, an in-person form that on paper that you want to give out. And then the student can kind of contribute to their recommendation that way. As counselors, we give them the information for counselor recommendation form. It's got 10 questions on there. And we want information from the student so that we can incorporate that into our recommendation as well. One of those things that we include is 2 or 3 adjectives that describe that particular student. How would their best friend describe them in that questionnaire? That can give you some adjectives to use while writing that recommendation. You can also ask them what they're passionate about inside and outside of the classroom, and you can include that right in the recommendation. I think what's good to know is that most students don't see their recommendation. So if you take that directly from that questionnaire, that's okay. And it's painting that picture for the college. And even if the student did write it, try to paraphrase it in some way and not take it verbatim. But I think it's important to include what a student might be passionate about, because there are things that you might not talk about with a student on a daily basis that never came up, and this is where it could come up and you could potentially use that. You should talk about how a student stood out in your class. Do they help others? Do they always ask the right questions? Do they show that deeper learning? You want to talk about how they may have stood out. It can be difficult to talk about a student that may not stand out, but maybe you can talk about them in a different way. Maybe they stood out in their lab reports. Maybe they were a really good test taker. Maybe they were the type of student that didn't ask questions during class, but then after class, they asked that really deep question. I think that's something that you can talk about as well. But think about those specific examples in the classroom and try to put that into the recommendation for that particular student. As I mentioned before, we're always trying to paint the picture of the story for the student. Does this student have a story? And I think that's important to talk about in your recommendation if you can. How did that play specifically into your classroom? If a student had a concussion or if there was something going on in their family that really played into it, but they showed grit and they got through it. Or the student that took AP chemistry and they had no business being in there, but they worked hard. They stayed with you after school every day. That's important to talk about. And it's not necessarily about the grade. It's more about the process and the journey for that particular student. Because if a student took an AP Chem and got that B, but the college sees from you that they worked incredibly hard to earn that B, that's important for a college to see. And counselor feedback, what I mean by that is I often read letters of recommendations for teachers, and I'm happy to read them. If you are stuck and you're not really sure where to go, or if you're just looking for another set of eyes to take a look at your recommendations, please feel free to pass that along to a counselor if they're willing, and they can read them for you and pass back some feedback to you. Some do's and some don'ts about recommendations. So do be an advocate for the student, highlight their strengths, their attitudes, and potential. Use specifics when writing about a student. So don't talk in generalities. You want to be specific and use specific adjectives with that about that student. Give specific examples of memorable conversations or an excellent paper or lab report that they turned in, or some insight that they had into a very difficult topic in class. Be cautious when overstating in your recommendation. So I have an example coming up that can give you an idea of what that looks like, but you want to be careful when you say the best ever, top 5, because if they're truly the top 5 or the best ever, they should demonstrate that in terms of grades, or maybe you can talk about that this truly was the best student I've ever had. That's a pretty rare occurrence, but if you can talk about that your recommendation can be really important in that application. Try to keep the recommendation to 1 page if possible. You have to remember that colleges get a lot of pieces of paper within that application. If you can keep your recommendation to 1 page, a page and a half, I think that would be great. We don't want it to go on forever if that's possible. So 1 page is really good. So don'ts. So don't address the specific college unless you're an alum. So don't write Dear BC admissions if they're applying to WPI. So you want to try to keep it general if possible. But if you're a BC alum, there's a way to add that application, that recommendation to the application separately, especially if you're in Navient. So try to not use specifics unless you're an alum. Don't use cut and paste for old recommendations or recycle old letters. I think this used to be a bigger problem in the past where colleges would see similarities in recommendations, where it was kind of a cut and paste where you can take one name out and put it on another. But try not to use and recycle old letters if possible. I know that there's times where the student really reminds you of another student that you had. I think at that point, it's good to refer back to an older letter of recommendation to try to get some ideas, or maybe you can rephrase what you wrote in that previous letter. I mean, if you wrote it 5 years ago, a college is not necessarily going to know that you recycled that particular paragraph. So sometimes old letters can be a good resource for you. Don't use generic and impersonal letters for recommendations. Be specific, as I previously mentioned. Don't agree to write a letter with 1 day's notice. That's a tough one. I think as a counselor, we try to give students deadlines to kind of put this buffer in place for teachers. So we say at the Bromfield School that they should make sure that they have all their teachers asked by October 1st. If they're applying for a November 1st deadline. That way it gives the teacher a month. Obviously, it's great to have more time if you can, But for the student that comes to you last minute and says that they need it the next day, that's really hard for a teacher. And we put that onto the student and say, you can't do this. This is not fair to the teacher. They put a lot of time and effort into this recommendation. So it's good if you can at least require 2 weeks minimum notice for a recommendation. That way you have enough time to do it. Because if you're getting a lot of students asking you to write these letters, you need the time to do it. So 2 weeks notice is a good buffer. A month notice is even better. See if you can work with your counseling department on putting those requirements in place, that they can kind of be the buffer for you between you and the student. That can go a long way. Don't report grades because they're on the transcript. If you want to talk about them working really hard and earning the B in the class, that's important to put the grade there. But if you're just regurgitating grades that they got, it's on the transcript and it's sort of just redundant within a student's application. But if it's part of a student's story, please include that. And don't repeat information that appears elsewhere in a student's application. So something that appears on their resume, in their classes, on their transcript, you don't want to repeat that. The counselor is going to talk about the student more on a broad perspective, and they're going to cover that, especially what's on a student's resume. But if you personally witness or coach a student, and please talk about that, because that can be important in a student's application. But if you knew that they played baseball and played basketball and you just threw that into your letter to add space to it, it doesn't add to the student's application. What they're looking for from teachers, again, is what's happening in the classroom, unless you personally witness that. Okay, so here's an effective letter, and below is why it's effective. Deborah's high scores in biology have consistently placed her in the top 5% of the class. In addition, her science fair project in marine biology demonstrated a high level of conceptual understanding of a number of complex varieties of plant life and animal life. All of this fits well with Deborah's plan to earn an undergraduate degree, then a master's and a PhD, so she can teach college-level biology while performing research on sea urchins. It shows superior academic achievement, extracurricular activity involvement, their personal qualities. It's got specifics in there. It shows the teacher's confidence in her abilities. This is an example from MIFA and from the College Board, but this is an example of a strong recommendation. And this is recorded. You will have access to my presentation if you want to refer back to this at some point, especially to the resources that I have listed. So please feel free to use this as an example for yourself moving forward. In terms of the structure and the format of the teacher letter, I think what we like to see as a counseling department, if it's on school letterhead, that's great. Hopefully your school can provide you with at least some sort of letterhead or some template that you can use. You don't have to get into the whole business letter aspect of a recommendation. It can be on school letterhead. It can say recommendation for Johnny Bromfield, and then you can move into your recommendation. Again, try to keep it to one page if possible. It's okay to go on to a second page if you need to. What I like to do in my recommendations is I title the paragraphs when I talk about their personality or their story, then I talk about academics, extracurriculars, talking about the closing. I like to title my paragraphs just to try to keep it structured. Over the past few years, there has been a new sort of format for recommendations that colleges have become favorable with, and that's doing bullet points instead of full paragraphs. And the reason they like it, it's an easy start and stop for the college, for the reader, where they can put it down and come back to it if they get a phone call, someone comes into their office. So it's an easy start and stop if you put that into bullet points. And I usually put my bullet points by paragraph, and it's not just a bullet point of all the qualifications of a student. I do it by extracurricular activities, academics, so I'll group them that way. It also eliminates the transitions for flowery language and reduces the time for writing. It really, to try to put that letter together, if you put it in bullet points, you eliminate all of that, and it can really shorten the time to write that recommendation, where the college is just getting the specifics. It takes all the fluff out of the recommendation, and they're really getting the facts and what they really need. And from the college admission reps that I've talked to, they like this way, but it's what works for you. If you prefer to write it in a paragraph format, please feel free to do that. But a bullet point can be a great way to get started. Okay, so as you move through there, so you want to talk about.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, go for it.
There's a question in the chat that says, does it make a difference if you're an alum when you're writing the letter?
I think it does. I think it can talk about a fit, uh, even if you may have graduated a number of years before the student. I think your experience of being on campus, knowing what it's like, knowing the student, it's almost like where some colleges have alumni interviews. It's almost like an alumni interview at that point. If you can talk about the college being a good fit from an alum perspective, that can go a long way. But you want to be careful about how that letter gets sent to the college. You want to make sure that that doesn't go out to all their colleges, just a specific college. But if you can talk about that from an alum perspective, I think that's a really good perspective to have.
One more question before we move on.
Yeah.
Do you have an example of the bullet point instead
Sure.
of paragraphs that you could show
Sure.
us maybe at the end or?
Yeah, I can pull up one of my recommendations. I know in my resources there are bullet points in there, but I can try to find one if that's okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. So back to my format of the teacher letter. In the introduction, you want to talk about your role, how long you've been in that role, how long you've known the student, and in what capacity. In the body, this is where you can start getting into those bullet points if you choose to. Talk about the student's character traits, their personality, their demeanor. This is where you can give specifics about the classroom, about their academic ability, talk about their story, interactions with peers, interactions with you. How did they grasp the material? How strong were they as a student? Did they ask those deeper thinking questions? If they struggled, did they seek extra help? Did they advocate for themselves? Did they stay after school? Did they work with a study group? What did they do if they struggled? Or what did they do to try to help someone else that may have struggled? I think that can go a long way and show them what colleges love to see in a student's application is leadership qualities. If a student is going to be a tutor or they're going to work with another student and you can see that leadership potential in a student, please put that in the recommendation. That can be really helpful for a college because colleges do look for leaders. And they don't necessarily have to be a vocal leader. They can be a silent leader. So if you can add that into a recommendation, that's great. Talk about their engagement in the classroom. Do they raise their hand? Do they sit in front? Do they help other students? Do they work well in groups? Talk about their future with the material. I mentioned that before. If they're going to be a STEM major, is that going to be a good fit for them in college? If they're not going to be a STEM major, can you talk about, if they're going to be an English major, can you talk about their lab reports? Can you talk about their writing abilities? I think that can be really helpful in a recommendation. And then after you get through the body, that can be 2 to 3 paragraphs, depending on how you structure yours. Then finish with the conclusion where you tie everything together and you wrap it up. And then the final statement should be whether you're recommending that student for admission. I wholeheartedly recommend Susie for admission at your institution. Thank you for considering her application. There's a number of different ways that you can end that, but you want to make sure that you're recommending the student for admission at the end of that recommendation. Because otherwise you wouldn't necessarily be agreeing to write that letter of recommendation for a student if you're not recommending them. And that can be a difficult conversation to have. And I think we approach that at Bromfield that a teacher doesn't have to agree to write that letter of recommendation for you. If they don't know you well, or there might be someone that might be better for them to write their letter, it's okay to say no. Especially if you have, 30, 40, 50 to do. I mean, some teachers get asked by all the students, and that's hard. We understand that. If you're at your capacity, please feel free to say no. But I know that can be a difficult conversation to have with a student. If you feel like you're not the best person, I think it's okay to say, I appreciate the relationship that we have, but I feel like I might not be the best recommender for you. Have you thought about your English teacher, your Spanish teacher? I think they may be a better fit. Or you can work with their counselor if you are thinking that they're going to write that letter for you. And we always ask our students to ask teachers in person. I know that sort of changes with how things happen in the spring and what's going to happen in the fall. So you may get emails. We try to have students not send emails, but we gave the okay this year. If you get an email from a student asking to write that letter, it's okay to say, let's talk about this. Please come and see me, or let's Zoom about this. So I think that can be an okay conversation to have. So here's a number of resources that I put together. And I believe in the Rowland Hall sample counselor letter, I think that's where they have some bullet points, which I can pull up at the end. But here's a number of resources, including an article from MIT, Hamilton, and Wellesley on tips for writing letters of recommendation. The college essay guy article, this first one at the top here, is a really helpful article. But I put these together for you, so please feel free to refer back to the presentation. And I think that these are some really helpful resources that we've given to our teachers as well. So please feel free to check these out when you have some time. So that's sort of it. Hopefully I covered what you were looking for, but please feel free to ask me any questions that you may have now about letter specifics. I'm happy to dive into Naviance. I can pull up the bullet point recommendation for you as well. I could talk about the Common App, student process for early action, early decision, their timeline. If there's other questions that I didn't necessarily get into, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Can I ask a question? We're a Naviance school as well.
Yep.
And so college recommendation sort of gets uploaded in a, generic isn't the right word, but it's not college specific.
Yep.
So should different letters go to different colleges to very specifically, say I have, many former students who had a great experience at WPI and we've stayed in contact. So whatever. I mean, when do you get personal about the school?
I think that can be helpful. If you've had other students that have gone to WPI that that they've been successful there and you see those same qualities, and they're applying to WPI. If you want to put that in there, I think that's okay. It can't hurt the student. But if you want to make sure that you upload that to a specific college in Naviance, this is where you can upload it. And so I have it requested here for WPI, but once a student has more colleges, you can add it to a specific college within Naviance. And that's how you can make sure that it goes to that particular college. But when I write a letter of recommendation, I'll always write a generic one first, then I'll make a copy of that and then change it to school specific and then upload it from there. I think that can be really helpful for a student. But it's difficult if you don't have Naviance. Common App allows you to upload it to a particular college, but Naviance is easy to do that.
Okay. And is that something I manage or the guidance counselor manages?
So this screen is actually from a teacher's perspective. So you can upload it to a particular college here. Yes.
Okay.
But as a counselor, when we go to send out student documents, we send them out to schools individually through Naviance. So there is a way, where we send it out once, but as teachers upload their recommendations, they're just sort of sitting in a file here in Naviance where we just pick the recommendations, we pick the transcript and we send it off. But if it's attached to a particular school, it will say just to that particular school, and Naviance defaults to send it to that particular school. So that's Naviance specific, but not, for schools that don't have Naviance, sometimes it can be a little bit more challenging.
Can I ask a question about Naviance as well?
Yeah. Yep.
I work at a school where 2 years ago, I think it was, they changed the way they upload them. They asked the teachers to upload the recommendations ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like when I made that change that the recs were no longer confidential. Is there something I'm supposed to do to make them confidential so the students can't read them, or is that a school-wide setting?
I mean, that's not a part on Naviance that students can see. That's on the school side, the counselor side. So students really shouldn't be able to see recommendations. And even when a student submits their application on the Common App, there's the part called the FERPA. And in order to upload recommendations and to match their account with the Common App and with Naviance, they have to waive their right to see their letters of recommendation. So they really shouldn't be seeing their recommendations. Colleges don't want them to see the recommendations. Well,
I've had parents and come up to me and thank me personally for what I wrote about their child in their recommendations. So clearly the families are reading them.
Yeah, that's odd. I don't know how they're getting access to them. Because I'm looking at this from your eyes, right? So when I go to upload the letter, this is just getting uploaded to the student's file on the school side, where from the student, so there's Naviance Student. That's pretty much a different platform than what we have here. So they don't have access to that. There's no way for them to see that. So I don't know how that was happening at your school.
I'll just have to ask there. I just thought maybe I had forgotten to do a setting or something.
No, I mean, the only way that I know that a student gets access to their recommendations is one, if they ask a teacher to see their recommendation, which some teachers are very willing to have a student read it. We had an English teacher that sat down and wrote it with the student. But it's up to the teacher whether they want to share that recommendation or not. And you don't have to. And the colleges doesn't necessarily want you to. They want you to write an accurate and honest representation of the student without feeling pressure from a family, that it's not good enough or whatever. Like they really shouldn't be looking at that letter of recommendation. And the other way that they can see that is once they're at a particular college enrolled, they can now go and view their file if the recommendation is still on file there. And I don't know how many students have done that. In my 10 years, I've never heard of a student actually going back into their file to try to read that letter of recommendation.
Thank you.
So. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
When you're writing about a student's class experiences, is it best to tell a specific anecdote about that student, or do you think that, because as a science teacher, I feel like it feels somewhat redundant. Like, oh, we talk about lab work and problem solving. Sometimes I think, everybody's writing the same thing about every kid.
Well, I think, for example, an anecdote can be when we did this specific project, the student did really well. I noticed they demonstrated a particular strength with this particular topic. Like that can be anecdotal in itself. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, we had this great conversation after class about molecular biology. And so I think anecdote can be very specific to a student. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a story. It can be, that they did really well on a project or on a test, or you notice that they're really good with other students. A recommendation is anecdotal in itself too, but if you have a story that you can tell that a counselor can't say, that a parent can't say about you specifically with them, that can be really helpful. But don't feel like you need to reach for that or make it up. Try to see what you can do that speaks specifically about that particular student, that paints that picture. Because if you're reading an application of a student, you don't necessarily know what the student looks like. You don't know what their personality is like. They're really trying to get that from your recommendation. So if your story can help paint that picture, that's where it's really helpful.
Okay, can we take a look at the bullet points?
Yeah. Let me try to find that. Yes. All right, here's a good one.
While you're looking for that, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So an issue that I had once that has taught me to ask this question is to ask what colleges they're planning on applying to, because there are some students that they're not a top tier student, but if they apply to the right colleges, then I would totally recommend them.
Yep.
And so what I'm wondering is, in some of the systems, like we don't use Naviance anymore, we use something else. Is there a way to, like, they can add schools later?
Yeah.
And so how do you handle?
I mean, it's up to the student. They really can apply to wherever they want. And as a counseling department, we try to make sure that we pass the message on to the students and to the families that when you're applying colleges, you need to have a balanced list of schools, target schools, reach schools, and safety schools. You need to have schools on there that that you can get into. You need to have schools on there that it's a 50-50 shot, and it's okay to have some reach schools. I have students all the time apply to colleges that they have no business applying to, but it's not up to me to say, you have no business applying there, don't even bother. If they ask for my opinion, I may say, well, let's look at the data on Naviance and see, here's you, and here's the average student is well above you. So it's going to be really hard for you to get in. You're welcome to apply, but it's going to be really challenging for you to get in. And I think they kind of get the idea at that point. They're still free to apply at that point. But
right.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. I'm not, if I'm not going to be comfortable writing, a strong recommendation for them to go to Harvard, but, the college, not the town. But I am, very happy to write a strong recommendation for UMass Lowell for them.
Well, I think just remember you're writing that recommendation for all schools. You're
I know
that's the hard part. And even if you felt that you're writing the recommendation for the strongest student in the school, number one student in the class, yes, I feel that they would be perfect for Yale. Well, Yale may not agree. Yale may feel that they're lacking in these other areas, or there's other students that are stronger. So a lot of the times it's out of our hands anyways too,
Yes.
Yeah. I have an example of a recommendation here. Let me just share my screen. So here's, it's an English recommendation. Here's the intro paragraph, academic and intellectual growth, where they put it into bullet points, where these are specific topics about the student. Personal qualities, they broke it down. So really those bullet points come into their, especially for this particular recommendation, and the academic and intellectual growth and their personal qualities, engagement in classroom and beyond. That's where they're adding those bullet points, not necessarily to the closing and to the introduction. But sometimes I get even further into my bullet points, and I'm happy to find one where it's just, this is what they got on their SATs. They took this many APs, this many honors classes. They were captain of this. So I break it down even further with my bullet points, and I eliminate all of the flowery language and transitions just to hit the facts, just so that they can look at this and this is the snapshot. It's almost like a resume at that point. But I still want to make sure that I have that story in the beginning where I'm not trying to trim that down by using the bullet points. But sometimes I will do bullet points in the intro paragraph where it's like, this is how they demonstrate honesty. This is how they demonstrate integrity. So sometimes I'll do it that way. I think it's really finding a system that works for you, where I've sort of developed a template for me that I know this is how I want to write the recommendation. And it helps me get through the recommendation faster as I'm filling in this template, just so I can get what I want out there. And if I feel like I need to break away from that template, then I will. So for example, if this was my template, I know that I need to fill in a section of the student's experience with the curriculum, their academic and intellectual growth, personal qualities. Like, this is their template that they use probably for every student. And I think that that's okay. I do something similar. I don't have the same structure that they have, but I do something similar so that I know that I'm hitting on everything in my recommendation. And if you want me to find one of mine in particular to share with you, I'd be happy to show that to you, just so you can see what that looks like. Let's see. Oh, here's another one for, I think this is a counselor rec. No, this is a math rec. So this is available for you guys at your fingertips in that resources section that I put together in the presentation. So please feel free to refer to this.
So just from looking at these examples, of course, there are only two, but it doesn't seem like the bullet point is really saving much space in the letter. I mean, it's like still really trying to get that letter onto one page. Yeah. That's a real challenge for me without going to too small a font or,
I mean, it's a big transition for people that haven't done that in the past. I think even for me, when I transitioned from the full paragraph to the bullet point, I found ways that worked for me and ways that didn't. And sometimes I'll go back to the full paragraph because I don't feel like the bullet point works specifically for the student. If especially when I have a student that struggles and I'm trying to figure out ways to talk about them, or if I don't have bullet points that kind of hit those high qualities that they have, I may need to talk about them in paragraph form to really paint that picture. So I'm sort of fluid in my process when it comes to recommendations, but the majority of them do incorporate those bullet points. But please don't feel like you have to do the bullet points. Counselors prefer each way. They said whatever works for you guys works for us. We just want the meat that's in there. We want to know about the student. So however you want to paint that picture that works best for you, do what works for you.
There's a question here that says, are counselor recs typically that long? That seems way more than one page.
It depends on the counselor and it depends on the student. So mine run, well, bullet points will make it longer. Mine will run a page to 2 pages, sometimes more. I mean, if you have a very accomplished student that you just need to hit everything, sometimes it goes on and on. But I think that's okay for admissions because they're looking for that full picture. But you know, mine tend to be on the longer side because I put those bullet points in, and it's not, I'm just trying to fit in as much material and take out all the transitions that I can. But you know, a page to page and a half is great for teachers. If you know the student really well and you want to go beyond a page, that's okay. You're painting that picture of that student. You know, if you have that great relationship, please feel free to put that on paper. It can only help the student at that point.
In small schools, like I live in a pretty small town, and it just so happens that I teach kids that are the same age as my children. And a lot of the kids I write for, I've known since they were children. I mean, I've so far have not really incorporated any of that into my letter, but sometimes I feel like that would be useful. Like I wrote a letter for a kid who I had him in my Cub Scout group.
Yeah.
And so I did incorporate a little bit of that because I'd had this prior experience with him. What is your recommendation for those kind of outside of school relationships? Does that add to your letter, or is it just a distraction?
I think it can add to your letter because I think if I'm an admissions rep reading that, I see, oh, this person has known the student for a long time. You know, they may have seen growth. You know, if you put a story in there that I remember when he used to play with my children or during Boy Scouts, he did everything without instruction. You know, he built this Lego tower without the instructions. You know, he had a real knack for this hands-on experience. And even now when I have him in my AP chemistry class, he still demonstrates that. You know, he had a love for environmental science and marine biology way back when. Well, he still has that. So I think those anecdotes that we talked about can be really specific in that recommendation. So please feel free to put that in. You know, that's a personal touch I think that teachers often look for. So that's really nice that you have that personal touch to be able to see that growth, you know, but you won't have that for everybody. And I think those letters are the ones that can be more challenging, where you're really grasping to try to find something for a particular student. Let's see. I'm taking a look at the chat.
Okay, so we have we're actually almost out of time. We have only about 5 more minutes. Are there any other questions that anybody else would like to ask before we wrap up? Well, I want to thank you for being here today. This was really, really helpful. I have one last question for you. I'm sorry, I volunteered to host this session because I really wanted to know about things. The very last question, maybe we can end with this, is if we go to your resources and we use a template, does that make our letter too generic?
Well, I think when you use that template, I think use it in terms of like a blank template. So if you want to steal the way that they have it set up, academic qualities, and then you talk about it there, that's okay. It doesn't make it too generic. But if you're taking verbatim what's in that letter, then I think it might not work for you. But it helps structure a letter. So when an admission counselor goes and reads that letter, they know specifically what you're going to talk about. You know, okay. I think that can be really helpful in knowing, well, if they're trying to get a picture of how strong a student would be for WPI, they're going to go right to that academic section and see how they did in science. They want to see how they did. They want to find that right in the letter. They don't necessarily want to read that, the whole letter to try to find that. But if they can pinpoint it because you highlighted the paragraph, academic qualities or lab work, however you want to structure that, that can be really helpful for a counselor. Because think about how many applications they're reading. Think about how long they spend on an application. Some application or admission reps will spend 10 minutes on an application because that's the amount of time that they have allotted for that, you know, and they need to move on. So they need to find that quickly, and that can help them find that information quickly, where they may not read the intro, they may not read the conclusion, but they're going to go into the meat of that and try to find that. And I think that's where I find the bullet point and labeling those paragraphs really helpful for admission reps. And this is just something that I've picked up along the way in having colleagues that are admission reps, that they've been gracious in telling us this works for us, but also we're willing to look at whatever you send our way. But I think they'll also, they know, and they can read between the lines when it's a weak recommendation, that they know that the student was sort of looking for somebody and they needed to sort of ask someone. They needed those 2 recs and they didn't really know you that well, or they may not have stood out in your class. They can see that, and that doesn't look bad on the teacher. It may look bad on the student. You know what I mean? And maybe that teacher at that point should have said, maybe you want to find somebody else. That's a tough conversation to have, though. I feel for teachers that have that conversation, and as counselors, when we sit down with our juniors in the spring, we say, all right, who are you going to talk to? What teachers do you want to ask for recommendations? If you're going to major in engineering, well, you probably want to ask your science and your math teacher. But sometimes colleges want to hear about from the English teacher that even though English wasn't their thing, they worked really hard, they struggled, but they worked hard and earned that B+ or A- or A+, whatever they got, but we have that conversation. So maybe our school is different than other schools, and we have the luxury of that because we're small, but I feel for teachers that a counseling department may not provide that buffer for teachers to sort of help kids along the way and help teachers too. We are colleagues here. We want to try to not have those conversations if possible. And even if, as a counselor, I have a student that may want to ask this teacher that they don't really know, I say, well, can we find somebody outside of school that may be better? But a lot of colleges will require 2 teacher letters of recommendation.
Mhm.
So,
Drew, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This has been a really great, informative talk.
hopefully everyone was able to learn something. I know I read a lot of my slides, but I wanted to put the information out there so you can refer back to it. But please feel free. I'm happy to provide my email. If you want to have me take a look at your recs, I'm more than happy to do that to try to help you in the process. Kristen and I have a good relationship where Kristen and I've looked at her recs before, other science teacher recs. So I am happy to help in any way that I can.
And your slides are going to be available for us.
Yeah, they're in the Google Drive right now.
Okay,
So, yep.
awesome. So everybody can use the Google link, the Drive link that Chris sent out in the letter, and we can access it there.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great afternoon. And I think I'm going to run home and start writing my letters.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
you.
So helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
what's
you,
next?
Sharon. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Drew. That was really great. I really, recommendations are so hard.
Yeah.
And I do know, I do copy and paste sometimes.
Yeah, but that's okay. I mean, if it fits for you, for another student, that's okay. I think in the days of old, there were blatant where it's the same recommendation. They just take the name out and put the new name in. And we've had teachers at our school that are guilty of that too. And even as counselors, sometimes we see recommendations that aren't great, and I think we put these workshops together for teachers to try to let them know sort of what colleges are looking for. Because as a teacher, this is a daunting task, along with doing all of your lessons, preparing, it's challenging for you guys. We get that.
It's outside of our regular
Yeah.
job. I mean, I'm not like one of those sticklers to the contract and everything, but this is a big responsibility that falls completely outside of all of our other stuff. And I don't feel like I can say no to a kid. Like, I feel like it's
right.
my job to do this. Like, I have to write for them.
Yeah.
And so I just feel like it frustrates me that schools don't give teachers more support in this process.
We've learned through this process that to try to help teachers as much as possible, because, even Kristen gets asked by 20, 30, 40 kids every year. Being an AP chemistry teacher junior year, you're going to get slammed with requests. That just happens. That's the hard part for teachers. And that's why I say start as early as possible. When we have our students that know that they want to ask a teacher, we say, well, ask them in the spring. You should have 2 asked in the spring, or 1 in the fall, 1 in the spring. That way it gives teachers lead time where you can give them the form that you need them to fill out. And if you can start over the summer, it really helps cut into your time in the fall, where you can actually enjoy the fall, especially Halloween, when you want to go out trick-or-treating or whatever, because there's some teachers that get asked last minute and they're doing recommendations on October 31st that are due for November 1st. That's hard, and it's outside of the hours. You can't plan lessons and write recommendations. One
I've
has to give.
so far this spring. Usually by now I have 20 kids who've asked me, and I've
And I
only had
think
2.
That's COVID.
Bracing myself because I know it's just going to be a flood right before that first deadline. So usually at the end of the year, I will give my kids a gentle reminder. I'm not fishing for Rex, but I just say to them, if you know you're going to ask me,
Yep.
let's go ahead and have a conversation now. And that way it kind of gets the ball rolling. But since I didn't see my kids in person, there was just no good time to do that. So
Yeah.
now I'm just waiting for the the onslaught.
Well, and if people are going to be virtual this fall, I mean, it's going to be hard to be able to write these recommendations and do all the virtual stuff. Because what we've seen in the spring too is that kids now feel like you're at your computer all the time, and they're going to email you at any hour to ask
Yep.
these particular questions, and they think that you're going to respond. That they don't understand the school hours still apply.
There's no such thing
Oh,
anymore.
right.
Sometimes I get stuff from the college kids like midnight the night before class, and class is at 9. Like, what do they expect me to do? Stay up to them?
They're not up at midnight catering to their every request.
Oh, no.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we got to use this channel for the next talk.
All right.
So we should
Well,
probably
Could
sign
probably
off.
stay until they come. I don't know where they're busy. They'll come.
Okay.
Was my email put out? Did people have that anywhere? Was it part of my information or no?
I don't know. Kathy, do you know the answer to that?
No, I don't know the answer to that. We can look in the chat if
I'll put my email
the
in
chat's
here.
going now. It's we have a directory of everyone, I
Oh, yeah.
believe.
Because I
So
want to be a resource for people if there's any way that I can help.
sure.
Yeah. Kristen
Great.
can always get in touch with me. So
Great. Thank you so much.
I put my email in the chat.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you get it, Kathy?
I got it. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Have a great rest of the summer.
All right.
Hi, Drew.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
care.
Thanks. Oh. Well,
That was really awesome.
yeah, he's great. All that good stuff.
Bullet points. I'm going to try the bullet points this year.
Wow.
And titles for the sections. I never thought of that before.
It's so hard to write stuff that's, I don't know. I guess it's just hard to write it sometimes, And then when
It's
you have
hard
to
to think
say
of
no to
something.
somebody, that's hard too.
I've never said no to anybody.
Well, that's great.
I don't know. I just feel like I can't say no.
Yeah.
Maybe that's my own issue, but I managed to write something about everybody.
Well,
I-
it's unusual to say no, actually. So
Yeah.
in a while.
Usually the kids know not to ask. The only ones that really ask are the ones that have absolutely nobody else, You get one of those every once in a while. But... All right.
All right. Well, let's see what happens now. And then we have an ending thing at 3:15. So, and then I don't know what. Hi, Denise. I can't hear you, Denise. There
Hi,
you are.
Kathy. How are you?
Oh.
Hi, everyone.
This is just a guided discussion about running in-person lab experiments with COVID-19 safety protocols. So I don't know. I
was
have,
hoping someone was going to tell me how to do it.
well, I certainly don't know how. So we'll see if anybody has some ideas. Well, I know they came into our lab at Rick, and the gentleman, we were making some videos, and he said we looked to see how many people might fit if they were 6 feet apart, and half the class would not fit. There'd be 9 people who would fit. Normally we'd have 12 stations with 2 people in a station, 24. So you couldn't even cut the class in half and then do that, do the lab twice, which is another idea. Yeah, Susan. Susan, go ahead. Just talk. You're mute.
So I had an idea of making larger groups. No, I'm not. So using larger groups of like 4 students in each group, which at a time to complete a step of the lab, and then come back, and then the next student would go back and do another step in the lab, perhaps. Probably wouldn't use that mode very often, but it's a possibility.
You could have them rotate through different labs, you know, at different times if you have space. I know if you have a small class, you can probably do that. But
was anybody given directions on how often things had to be cleaned, or if the students could wash the stuff themselves, or if they had to, if we had to do stuff? Because we've been given no direction.
I don't know. I think what we were going to do is to clean the lab bench ourselves after the kids left. But they could do that as well.
Sanitizing wipe or
Yeah. Yes, a spray and stuff.
You guys have any concerns about using disinfecting sprays on a chemistry lab bench?
No, I don't. It pretty much won't.
Should be okay.
Nothing will happen to our benches.
What about, is there anything that it could react with that we shouldn't use?
The only thing I can think of, I can't think of anything as far as I know, unless somebody knows better, but one thing is that some kids might be allergic to some of those sprays. Cleaning materials, that has happened once. But I doubt if they're highly reactive. I mean, you know, we're not talking about having anything dangerous on the counter or anything like that. You know, mostly glassware and stuff they've used that they've cleaned.
Can I just ask, so just for context, are
Yeah.
the people in right now potentially having in-person labs? Like, are some of you, is everyone kind of thinking I'm at least part-time in school? Is that
my
right?
school's doing a full opening, so
Yeah.
one thought I had, and I don't know how long it's gonna last, that is for sure. So one thought I had is like get as many labs done as I possibly can.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, my
I had-
school's going to do in person, but we're going to have a portion of kids remote from the beginning. So I have to do everything supposedly at the same time with both groups. I don't know how we do a hands-on lab with them at home while we're doing a lab at school. No one can explain that part to me.
I think that sounds to me like the hardest scenario, Pam.
Yeah.
My school is starting all in person. I had to come up with protocols for labs as the department head. So I'll share the document I found that describes, my wife's actually a lab medicine doctor, like a real doctor. So she,
Great.
yeah, she runs the lab at our hospital. So I'll share the document in a moment, because I needed to come up with something to show that the protocols were safe to our public health to get approval to run labs, which they approved. So I'll just share that document. You can see the chemicals that they used in the paper. It was a paper that was done this year. So
If you can send that to
Thank you.
NEACT 1898, where you put your other materials as well on the Google Drive. Okay.
Has OSHA determined anything? Because now that in the last year or whatever that public schools have to follow OSHA safety guidance, I haven't seen anything.
I am not an expert on that. I don't know. Not to my knowledge.
For what it's worth, Flynn Scientific has been running a bunch of webinars this summer, and a couple of them relate to lab safety type issues. There was one that they did on storing materials over a longer than expected absence. So I know they're running a couple more sessions of that this month if you're interested in it. It was somewhat helpful, but it was a lot of basic general hygiene, chemistry hygiene stuff with a few extra tips. Although they still haven't been able to answer the question of like how to clean aprons, because you can't throw lab aprons in the washing machine. If you have lab coats, you throw them in the washing machine. If you have lab aprons, I think their best recommendation was just wipe them down, but you have to wipe down the straps as well, which means they're not going to be ready for the next class period. You know, and we always sanitize goggles, I hope. But, you know, there were some issues like that were, you know, it just, there were a bunch of things to think about in there, and they've put thought into a lot of them so far. So that was kind of helpful.
Were they of the opinion that just putting the goggles in a UV cabinet was good enough, or did they suggest washing them?
They actually suggested either dipping them in a bleach solution and letting them air dry, dipping them in a disinfectant solution and letting them air dry, or UV sterilization. So any of those three.
And that's what I agree. That's what I thought too, Pam. The paper there that I think you should see in the chat if it worked has it has like either a 0.1 or 1% sodium hypochlorite, so just a diluted bleach. Pretty diluted, actually. I was surprised at how diluted it, and that's effective in 1 minute, so that's pretty good. And I have UV sterile, a box for the safety glasses. I'm gonna do 6 feet apart. We're very lucky in that our classes are good because we changed our schedule, are going to be very small. So probably I'm looking at 12 to 14 on average in my classes. So I'll split and do 6 or 7 doing a lab, which I think I can fit, and then 6 at their desks just spread out.
I measure my lab benches are 4 feet across and there's 4 feet between them. So if we're trying to maintain 6 foot distancing, I can put 1 at a bench. I have 6 benches. I have right now classes of 16.
We're not allowed back in our school buildings yet. We've actually been locked out. Our key cards don't work, so we don't know.
Oh, wow.
How to set it up.
Yeah, me too. How can
That's
you have
scary.
kids do, like, we've always done partners. How do you do partners if they have to be
So one thing that came up in another class that I thought was intriguing was the idea of having one present partner and one virtual partner. So pair up the kids that are in class with the kids that are out of class. One kid is doing the physical work, the other one is doing the recording, and then they work together on the analysis. And then if, depending on, I don't know how it'll work out until I know how many kids I'm going to have in the classroom and how I'm going to have remote, you know. So, but you could even have one sitting elsewhere in the room while one of them's at the bench working. And then the other thing that I've been talking with my co-teacher, not co-teacher, but my other chemistry teacher about is not having them move around. So not having common supplies for chemicals anymore. There'll be a supply on each lab bench that we can then wipe down in between classes quickly and move on, or either that or we have 2 sets so that we put 1 set out, use it for the first class of the day, and then we rotate it out with the second set while we can clean the other one. Because we only have 1 chemistry room, so only one of us is teaching chemistry at a time. So I think the schedule is going to work out so that we can make that happen. But, you know, can't do anything under the hood, right? We can't do anything that has to be stored under the hood. We can't do anything that we need to keep one single supply in one part of the room like we normally would and have them come get it. We have to distribute ahead of time. So like we had just gotten a grant for $500 and we're spending most of it on small containers that we wouldn't normally use because that's what we got to do. And we got to be ready to potentially send some stuff home to do labs at home when we inevitably go remote, right? Because I think everyone's expecting that to happen eventually. But the organization that's going to be required is scary. I don't know, you guys have ideas?
I had been thinking about, so we have these like 3-foot lab benches, and it's a lab bench, then a stationary sink, lab bench, stationary sink, lab bench. So I guess in theory, if you have one kid sitting on the far end of this one, skip a spot, and then another kid, 1 per lab bench, we would be all right. I had the thought that maybe we could do what they did in college where each like bench has its set of glassware and that's all the glassware you get for the term, and if you break it, oh well.
Yeah.
But I'm wary of the kids' ability to clean their glassware well. And I was thinking maybe like before we do the lab, you clean your glassware. After we do the lab, you clean your glassware, because we would have 4 or 5 classes in a day.
Right.
That's what Lynn recommended, though, that the equipment be cleaned before and after use. So really from the transition of one class to another, it would be cleaned twice, right? By kids, I know,
Right.
it would be cleaned twice.
But 2 partial cleanings hopefully equals 1 real cleaning, because
Right.
I never want to put a kid in a position where, like, our administration recommended that kids clean their desks and stuff before they leave the room. It's like,
Mhm.
no, I want them to clean it on their way into the room. I want to be handing out wipes at the door, and they clean their own space
Yes.
so that they're not depending on some other kid to have done a good job.
Mm-hmm.
And plus that way they're moving around the room less, right? Because we're not supposed to be just freely moving around, so they get it on their way in, and then they can throw it out on their way out the door. I don't care if it sits on their desk all during class, you know.
Is the
So
school providing the wipes?
theoretically, they say they are. I don't think they've realized things like, you know, when you're storing liters of hand sanitizer, that's a flammable substance. And it should be in a flammable cabinet, not sitting in the nurse's office for, you know, fumes to accumulate. There's some stuff like that that's like, oh dear God, no one's thought of that one yet.
They don't have paper towels for us normally, so.
Oh.
Yeah, we typically run out because the custodians don't always check all of the paper towel dispensers. And in the chemistry room, you think we would have them trained by now, but then they rotate around. So like every 2 months we get a new custodian on our wing, and we run out of stuff. So, but by now I know all the custodians, so I'll be checking in with them frequently, you know, just to make sure. Because if you don't know your custodians, get to know them this year. They're going to be very important people in your life.
Bake them cookies.
Yeah. Treat them well. Buy them coffee, whatever. Come on, people. I need brilliant ideas. Speak up. No.
Some of the labs that
I'd love to talk more about your idea about having the virtual person being part of the partnership. Does that mean you're going to have like 12 little Google Meets going on?
Possibly. And I don't know how well the school Wi-Fi is going to do with that. I know they were planning on beefing it up, but who knows if it's going to be enough. Although, I mean, you know, if I leave it to the kids and they're having trouble, because we're a Google school, so if they're having trouble on Meet, they can do it through Hangouts. They can do it through texting each other, because it seems like there's enough people in our town with endless supplies of money that their kids all have unlimited phone plans, or they certainly use it as if they do. So if they default to that, that's okay with me. You know, whatever device is going to work. This is just an idea that came up like Monday.
It's actually a good idea because they're live streaming us. So that would actually, and I was trying to figure out how to deal with doing a lab and having the live stream, but that would actually overcome it.
I think there's definitely, if I can work out the logistical kinks, I think it's a good way to keep the kids that are not physically in the classroom involved. And, you know, as soon as we get a few cases in the community or a case or two in the school, we're going to flip to a A-B schedule. So in that case, I could have, you know, if we're doing the lab on Monday, then the Monday kids that are at home can be the remote one. And then if we're doing it on Thursday, then they're the in-person, the other person is remote. So I'm hoping I can kind of finagle it, but like I said, until I know like what my rosters are actually going to be, because our school has also talked about if it's a class that has multiple sections, like our core, you know, freshman and sophomore classes have 8 sections apiece, so we have an eight period schedule. They're probably going to take all the kids that are signing up to be remote at the beginning of the year and put them into one section, so that there will be a simply remote section. But that means I would only, and we have 5 sections of chemistry this year, I think, so it's potentially could do that. I don't know who's going to end up teaching that. I don't know how that's going to look, because supposedly we're doing the exact same thing for the remote as the in-person. So how do these combine? I don't know. But that would mean I'd only have a few kids remote, though those who were currently being quarantined or were out sick or something like that. So I kind of like, I'm trying to like wrap my head around what I can do if I have 2 kids out, if I have half the class out, if I have only 4 students in the room and the rest of them are at home, or if we're completely quarantined because somebody that was in our class got sick, you know.
Strongly suggest groups of 4, because if you do 2 remote, 2 in person, or you each group does 2 trials, one of them's going to be out sick, or one of them's going to like just peace out and not be there. So you don't want to leave the kids dependent on somebody who's not going to be there. So like put them in bigger groups and
So have them like
middle
mini pods assigned or something. That's a
Yeah.
good idea.
And change it up every few weeks so the kids don't get stuck with a loser of a partner.
Oh yeah. Been there. Yeah.
I kind of like.
Did I hear
that-
somebody? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just thinking, I kind of like that mini group idea where maybe they develop the analysis asynchronously, like offline. So kids they can work together. It's going to be very different looking than a traditional lab report, but you could have, okay, so during think of a titration, right? Like obviously you're recording data and volumes and everything, but like almost make it more of a showcase, like a little mini project then for the four of them. They could have, okay, so here's your first titration data, a couple pictures, analysis, calculations, have them all contribute. You'd have to build more extensive questions for 4 kids, because obviously a small lab for 4 people is going to be pretty easy to do. But like almost more cooperatively than anything, right?
Todd, I kind of like some ideas that are coming to my head when you say that, is that usually we only do data collection one time through in a lab because we simply don't have time to replicate everything. And we all, I hope, know that, 3 is the magic number, but the more replications you have, the better to actually get data you can actually analyze. So actually having them combine data in multiple groups like that is really, I like that idea. I think there's some definite advantages.
You might be able to do fewer labs in the year, but maybe go a bit deeper though, right? Like, so instead of doing, I don't know, if you're lucky and you can do 12 or 16, that's fantastic. But if you only get 8 in, maybe 1 a month, still there's good experience if they're working a little deeper on 8 labs than just an option, right? So,
about the data and the multiple data points, we were in a different session and somebody, I don't know, maybe it was, somebody said that it would be really important if you had a virtual kid that couldn't do the thing at home or couldn't do whatever, that they have canned data sets. But instead of it being canned, if every time you do a lab, you have one Google Sheet that the representatives all add their stuff to, so what normally would have been individual or small partner labs, you also have a class data set, so you can always do an analysis of 10 or 12 different trials and be like, how does my data compare to the class? Like, is that an outlier? What did that group do? What's their procedure? And I don't know.
Yeah, we've done some kind of stuff before where we collected class data for stuff where the normal data is iffy, like collecting temperatures at which water does different things, whatever. There's been a few things we've done that before. And in the past, I've always had the kids come up to a whiteboard and write in their data. Obviously, that can be done virtually too. It's a little harder to keep them honest and make sure they're not screwing up somebody else's stuff if they're entering their own numbers. So might have to come up with a way for me to actually could just do a simple Google form and have them type their numbers in or something, and then I put it into a spreadsheet.
You definitely do a Google form. My kids in class have numbers, like your number 1, your number 2, your number 3. So that's the number line that you get to do stuff.
Oh, I like that. We're going to have to do that with goggles anyway. We don't normally worry about number goggles, but you gotta, right?
Solubility.
I tend to think everybody should just buy their own goggles, and then the town supply goggles to kids who have needs. I just think that they should just wear their own goggles. Because that's because those cabinets, like if the kids don't put them in the cabinets right, like with the UV light, it's a nightmare.
That's what we do. Every kid has to buy their own goggles.
Yeah, I think it's always bothered me that they're putting this stuff on their face anyway.
That was my first thought about goggles, but then I think it was somebody in the Flynn thing pointed out that if the kids are responsible for washing their own goggles, you don't know if they're actually getting cleaned or not.
So what is this Flynn thing you guys keep talking about? I heard.
So Flynn Scientific is a supply company.
Yeah, no, of course. But did they put out a special COVID thing?
They've been doing a whole series of webinars this summer on all things about teaching science, and they're promoting some of their own stuff. Of course, they're promoting their own safety products, and they're promoting. They've got some science to go or something like that, labs to go. some virtual oriented stuff, and they did a bunch of live labs in the spring. Unfortunately, everything they did for a live lab was stuff that we had already done and covered. But I hear they were actually pretty good, and they provide the data to the students for analysis, and they even provide questions and stuff for you to use. So it's definitely a worthwhile resource to look into. So if you just look on the Flynn website, you can track it down from there.
I would download all their stuff before they make it pay again. They made it free in the spring.
It's still free for now. Yeah, I don't know if they have plans to change that or not. I hope not, because we're going to be in this for a while. And I don't know about your districts, but mine's going to be spending every penny that they have on PPE and stuff, and we don't have extra money to buy subscription services that are only going to be used for a while.
I'm a little late, but can I ask a question? Did you talk at all about just like, I teach a CP class. We do kind of light labs, you know, like just types of reaction stations, combustion, double replacement, single replacement, you know, around the room. Is that something we can do if they have masks on? Or is that going to have, does people think something like that is like your opinion? Would that, you have to be totally reconfigured?
So not to dominate here, but I'm going to go back to the Flynn stuff that I did earlier this summer, and their chemical safety experts say masks should not be a problem. If your kid's getting close enough to a Bunsen burner to set their mask on fire, then their hair's already burning. So
well,
it should not be a problem.
I just mean like before COVID, you know, we put out the 6-well plates and at the stations, and like, can they walk around and do these? No.
Well, I haven't.
Like, I guess they can't because they have to sit forward.
Talk to your administration if you could keep them 6 feet apart at all times while they're walking around. I know that we're supposed to keep. I have some questions. I have a list of questions to go over with my principal. Like, what exactly are the rules here?
I mean, I don't know how you can keep kids. I mean, I don't know. I just walked by a camp this morning and the kids weren't 6 feet apart, but they had masks on and they had temperature. I just don't.
If they're outside, it's different.
Oh, okay. I mean, I get that the desk has to be that way, but I can't like walk around with tape measures between them. I mean, I guess I have to set the room up that way.
I'm planning on just having,
labs.
for that day, the kids that are doing the lab are seated at the lab bench. I wouldn't normally have them sitting, but you know, for this, they can have a stool when they're not actively working, and that's their spot for the day. Because I can't fit. We have a fairly small room, and I've got, right now, my classes are small, but I think Brenda's got one of 21 kids. And when I paced out, like, once they finished the floors and I could get into my classroom, when I paced out where the desk would have to be, I could fit 9 kids.
Yeah.
Spread out in desks. 9.
Right.
Where am I going to put them?
So, right. But so if they're doing a lab, they have to.
They had not a party. When the kids were getting together over the summer or whatever, they gave all of the kids those $1 noodles, the pool toys.
Yeah.
Because those were about 6 feet long. And they said you could stay a noodle apart.
Wow.
But I know that that's probably a fire hazard in a lab, but like that's kind of the soft sort of visual that I think we need in our school.
I kind of wanted to get those giant blow up hamster bubbles, you know, but they can't really manipulate lab stuff through that. But in the hallway, I think that would be awesome. You know, you stay in your 5 foot across bubble and you're isolated from everybody else, because the science hallway is the freshman hallway where the freshmen have their lockers. And it is traditional for the first half of the year to be able to get from one classroom to the next between classes. We teachers literally have to like grab a backpack, say, excuse me, pull them to the side, excuse me, because they don't understand how much and they don't understand space at all. Not when they're with their friends. It's like totally out of their head. And I coach a robotics club, and I've been meeting with the kids for that this summer since the 4th of July. We got the okay. It's like, okay, we're coming back to summer school. If you guys follow the same rules, you can meet. So I meet with 2 teams at a time. I have a maximum of 5 kids with me. And as soon as they get close to the robot and start working, they are shoulder to shoulder. And I'll remind them and they'll step away. And then 30 seconds later, as soon as they're into something, they're shoulder to shoulder, because they're teenage boys and that's what they do. So, you know, so far I've been able to keep each team isolated. So I have 3 boys on this team and they work together, and I have 2 boys on this team and they work together, and they don't get close to each other. and I can stay reasonably far away from them, and we're all wearing masks, you know, and they've been good about keeping their masks on. These are sophomore boys, a sophomores, juniors, and a senior. The sophomore boys are good about keeping their masks on. They have not given me any trouble. It's just for 2 hours at a time, though, and they want to be there. They desperately want to be there, but they cannot stay apart. They just can't. They just can't. So I
mean, in my house with people, it's just impossible inside. So I mean, it's possible if you're sitting at desks, you know, I'm sure. I imagine people like work in a restaurant in a kitchen. I mean, I imagine they like have less people, but
as soon as you start to move from one place to another, you're passing close. So
I just can't understand the hands-on lab piece myself.
I don't know.
Except just doing like all brand new labs, which feels like on top of all new assessments and remote teaching, it seems like a lot to make brand new labs. Of course, simulations, like I'm fine with that. But as far as like hands-on.
So I think it was before you came in April, we were talking about the idea of having one kid do the hands-on and other kids remotely linked to them doing recording and making observations and stuff. And that's honestly, that's the best I've heard so far, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any other brilliant ideas floating around out there? Because I'd love to hear them. Yeah, there's a lot of head shaking. Denise is thinking.
Would you be comfortable with them FaceTiming each other when they're doing that?
If they already have each other's personal information and they're just doing it on their own, yeah, I would not force it. But, you know, if that works for them.
Yeah, Google Hangouts work. I mean, at least in our school district, Google Hangouts was the way to go.
Yeah.
So are you a one-on-one, one-to-one with technology? We're not there.
Bring your own device.
Well, we can't, the kids can't get on the Wi-Fi because they always crash it because our Wi-Fi can't handle it. So if the kid doesn't have their own data, Hazel, nope. If the kids don't have their own data, then it's unfair to ask them to do that. So we have to use like, they want to do, every class has a Chromebook cart, but then you get into the issue of multiple people getting over there to the cart, touching all the stuff.
You can't share equipment. That's the whole thing.
Right. So
that makes the station, if we can't share equipment, that station rotation
can't
work.
Yeah, the station rotation idea to me doesn't sound workable at all.
Right.
Now, every kid is in love with their phone. So if we could figure out ways to incorporate as much usage of iPhones as scientific equipment, that'd probably be good.
Well, now, in my daughter's hospital work, she works in a hospital. She is not 6 feet apart from her coworker.
Right.
That's what the masks are supposed to.
Yeah.
So if they're in masks and if it's a lab where they could, now you couldn't do this with I don't like kids wearing gloves with Bunsen burners.
Right.
But if they're wearing gloves at the station and they're wearing masks at the station, can they be closer than 6 feet?
Well, no, but even like if they're wearing gloves, does that sort of get over like
the fact that they're touching?
Right.
But I mean, I think people are coming down on the touching thing. It's droplets. I mean, I'm not saying that.
I agree with you. It's like the mask. Yeah. So like, why are we worried so much about sharing equipment then?
I mean, at the beginning of the summer, my co-teachers were like, "Oh, we can't even have packet," and we're still not doing paper. But I just don't know where we stand. I don't know if anyone knows the answer, but I wonder if it's still kind of iffy on the touch of like, and they touch the ring stands.
Most of the transmission was due to droplets, and it was coughing, laughing, anything.
Singing.
So if you cut down on that, can you still touch? I mean, touching things less people touch the police, and then they touch the ring stand.
But if the kids have masks on and gloves, I mean, are not going to impact transmission, but it keeps them from touching their face if they have gloves on.
Yeah.
And they're touching the handles of the doors. I mean, I know they're using all the exits now and entrances, and they're going to be touching things.
Well, at our school, we're supposed to be opening the door
Doors
and letting
open.
them out and in.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Though in theory, there's some poor person's job is to kind of rotate around the school wiping handles.
Oh boy.
I mean, they're sitting at desks. I know our kids have to clean off the desks.
Right.
Clean. And I mean, I don't know. Can they pick up a ring stand? But maybe the Flynn website. I need.
But what I'm
learn.
saying is this was there was pretty good screening at this hospital. I mean, I could show you a picture of my daughter and her coworker in masks and closer than 6 feet because that's what the workplace required her to be. So I don't know if they've changed it all, but I don't.
Yeah, but what they do in one place versus a school is two very different things.
True. I mean, I get it, but I'm like,
our school committee has no idea, and the health department has no idea. Like they're not even talking to each other.
Which is maddening to me. So now my superintendent, who's an okay person, I guess, but he is no infectious disease specialist. And it just
one person you might want to talk to about these policies is your school nurse.
That's true.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I need backup. We need to have.
Right.
I don't want the.
No, there needs to be a plan, and we don't want to hang.
Deciding.
We don't want to hang our heads out there to get chopped off as the easy target.
But I don't want to have them come into chemistry in school to sit face forward and do simulations on their Chromebook.
Right.
I mean, I don't mind it. I don't mind it. But I'm just saying, and I don't want to push anything. I'm more cautious. I want to be cautious. Just want to,
But you're right. I mean, if they're going to be there, they should be there. Otherwise, what's the point of being there?
Well, art already is our school. Art's remote. Obviously, music's remote, but art's remote. And I don't know if they said, "Oh gosh, they can't all share paintbrushes." But my chemists, they're like, "Oh, they should come in for science," which is fine. But how am I that different than art? I'm not. I have everything that art has.
That microscale guy, I liked the stuff that they were doing because everything was so small. It almost made it like if you had to purchase stuff, almost made it like affordable to the stuff that you can throw away. Or like the whole building it yourself. I don't think we can have the kids bring in their own things from home, but if you happened to have a recycling club or something, or I don't know.
There's a note here from Susan. She has a terrible upload speed. She said, what about having a student demo a lab and have one do a station demo one at a time and the student could explain what they're doing? And is that a liability issue, or is that, how does that go? I mean, the kids do the labs anyway.
That's where I like
the
idea of the remote idea, because it does get kids having to explain and make observations and talk to their peers about what they're seeing and doing, as well as ask questions. Susan, you had a question. I think your hand went up. No.
I think we would want to minimize risk, and the liability was about touching items, she says.
One thing that I had thought about with the demo area is videotaping myself doing the lab ahead of time so kids could review it. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Susan.
Susan, you're going to have to
touching.
Yeah, about touching items that you'd be using in the lab, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, they touch them anyway if they were doing the lab, as long as it wasn't dangerous.
If they're washing their hands afterwards, there shouldn't be much risk just of touching something.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I always have them wash hands after a lab anyway.
We even get scented soap so that we can smell if they've washed their hands.
No.
We don't rely on the school soap. We go to the dollar store and get strongly scented soap.
That's great. That's smart.
Wow, that's a good idea.
Soap from
that's Brenda Mitchell's.
year
That's her idea.
that we use.
Sorry, Karen?
The kids, the previous, well, not this past year, but usually the year ahead, the very last lab is making soap, and they make all the cocktail size ones, and We were just like, you need soap? Here's like 10 of them at each thing. I was thinking about assigning a soap to a kid. Like,
That's awesome. We could do that as the first one. Since I haven't done it a lot. I like make your own soap.
This is sodium hydroxide. They
Yeah,
gotta
it's
calculate well.
it's not a good one for the first safety thing. It's
Oh, okay. We won't do
You
that.
want to wait on that one. It's a little dangerous.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I highly recommend the scented soaps because you can go to, the dollar store and buy a dozen of them for $12,
Of course, you really shouldn't be smelling their hands at this point. Just saying.
No, but if they think you can smell their hands, see.
You probably can. I don't know.
I'm talking about with the mask and COVID.
Oh, yeah. Well, you can't smell with a mask on.
Not very well.
Or you shouldn't
Have
be.
you guys done that glow germ thing?
Oh.
Not in chemistry.
No. I feel like we should, as a lab, be like, okay, first lab of the day, where everybody's going to wash their hands. Like, let's see if we can, and then do the glow germ and see if kids wash their hands appropriately. It's like life skills.
I saw something on, I don't know, Pinterest or somewhere crazy about the idea of using a little bit of glitter. If you put a little bit of glitter for each kid and then at the end of their activity, have them see what they've actually touched that they've transferred the glitter to. The problem is getting rid of the glitter afterwards.
That's cool too.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
These are great ideas.
I think I would hold the glitter one until they were not following the rules, and then I'd be kind of coming down hard on them.
There might be glitter all over the school, though.
Yes, there probably would be. And
Yes.
the library folks would be very, very angry at me because they get very angry when anything gets trapped onto their carpeting. Yeah.
We one year we put things in the yearbook. It was like little things that when you open the book, they would fall out. It would be a glittery thing. Boy, that was a mistake.
Don't do that one again.
If
I
we
heard. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, if we have our fume hoods on and venting the whole class, is that good?
That's a good idea. That improves air circulation.
Right?
And windows open if you can do it.
But I thought you were supposed to blow positive air into the room rather than suck the air out of it. I don't know.
Why would one be? Yeah, well, if you've got good air.
Yeah.
If you've got the windows open and the fume hood is running, then it should be pulling outside air into the room, which
Exactly.
is good.
Yep. But if you can't open your windows and you have the hood on, then you're potentially pulling in air from the hallway.
Right.
But they
And
told
I
us to
know
have our hallway open, the doors open to make more airflow. But I thought that didn't make any sense.
Well, then there's the whole security thing. It's like, oh, do school outside. Have we forgotten why we've all gone inside with locked doors?
Yes, our superintendent even talked about that and saying that we are having to find a compromise between the safety things that we've been trying to implement over the last few years with using multiple entrances and exits and all these other things, and having kids show up at different times, and it's you can't do both.
Think about what your lockdown drills are going to be like, huh?
But then again, think about what are the chances of dealing with COVID-19 in your classroom versus an active shooter in your classroom.
Depends how crazy people get, I guess.
Depends.
We've had scares.
Well, just at least if they're angry about the schools being closed so they can't go to work, we won't be there to be shot.
They're opening every door now. And before we had one person, one door, watched, super safe. Now all the exits, entrances, different times. It's like take from one, adds.
Right. We used to have open campus for juniors who were allowed to come in late or leave early, and seniors were allowed anytime they had at least an hour of free time, they were allowed to leave the school and come back. And now they're extending that out to freshmen and sophomores.
Wow.
And I'm afraid because I mean the idea is that if you're not in a class, don't be at school.
Yeah.
Go home. If you have transportation, go home. But I'm concerned about little parties in the parking lot and kids that forget to come back. And, and then there's a lot, like my son will be driving with me. We don't have a spare car for him to take. So he's stuck for the duration because he's in the same school I am,
Has anybody else been given guidance that the students will be eating in their classrooms?
Yes.
My classroom is the lab.
No, we can't. We've been told that science and maybe science only. If you have science during the lunch period, you will go to the cafeteria, whereas all the other classrooms will be in their classroom. So
Interesting.
science gets the pass to the caf.
Okay, interesting. Because I think they're turning our cafeteria into more classrooms.
Ooh.
It might be the only thing I actually know because we haven't had any staff meetings since before March.
Our headmaster just quit, so yeah, likewise.
I can imagine administrators are pushed to the absolute
I can't.
wall.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
Now, like, we
Pretty
got a
intense.
question.
We have a brand new superintendent. You gotta feel for the guy.
Oh, jeez.
We had a question, Mel.
Yeah.
Mel? Yeah, about wearing let's see, being 6 feet apart and wearing a mask. Do you need to do both of those things?
Well, that's. I think the recommendation is not exactly firm on this one. I think some places it will say you need to wear a mask if you cannot social distance. But I know my university, they are going to enforce both. So you have to wear mask and you are going to keep the 6 feet distance. And we reconfigured almost all our classes and labs. So we can only now have 10 or 11 students in the lab instead of the regular 16 to 20. So that's, they have marked all the rooms to a smaller number. And some of them, I think the way they did it is took the square feet of the room and divided by 36, which doesn't quite work out well because we can't just move things in chem labs. But I think we'll manage it. The chem labs, I think it turned out to be, and bio labs too. The numbers they gave us are about half of what we normally have. So what we do is we bring them in for half the day, 1 day a week, and the other week that day the other half will stay home and do remote lab, and then they swap. So next week, those who were home the previous week will come to hands-on lab. So we've decided about half the labs, which are the most critical for learning hands-on skills, they will get that in Gen Chem and organic. And those are the only ones we have labs this semester. We are not teaching PChem until spring. So an analytical will be in spring. Analytical will be a challenge to do it. So that's what the plan at Fitchburg State is. But still there are a lot of kinks. One of my anatomy and physiology professors, she has to do everything remotely because of her health reasons. So she has come up with all modeling labs. So she says that's even better than hands-on lab because they can go deeper into the body systems. You can see more about the different parts of the body through virtual lab than if they were able to do with a regular physical model or a cat. I mean, they used to dissect cat.
So April, what you have a question?
This is great. That's kind of great because I have 12 we're having 12 in the school at a time, and so that sounds. I mean, the room's big.
Yeah.
I just have one little detailed question. Are you planning any like special extra cleaning of materials in between, like for those labs?
Yeah, I think each lab will be supplied with the cleaning wipes and sort of things like that. And so it's at the instructor's responsibility to get the students to do it. Once they finish, they will be cleaning up their space. Including the equipment. So the next group that comes in, we don't have too many labs that have back-to-back groups coming in, but I doubt if the custodians will be cleaning our equipment. So we will have to do it. We have lab techs who will who usually go in between labs and clean things, and
Okay.
they do that anyway. Yeah, so she takes all the goggles and put them in the UV cabinet where they are zapped with the UV light for half an hour.
Okay, so they share and they kind of reuse goggles. They don't have to have their own.
No. So we don't. We usually have a set of goggles per lab space, and you know, in college the labs are, you know, you each Gen Chem lab will have about 8 sessions during the week, so we can't afford to give them all individual goggles.
Right.
We just have the 16 or 20 in the cabinet, but the cabinet is UV cabinet. So
that sounds very good and very reasonable.
Yeah, I think they are relatively inexpensive. I think we had them. They are mounted on the wall, so they were built when we built the building. Yeah, even I think they are movable.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
Is there
and
any
go ahead.
discussion of using alcohol to spray down the equipment or because I remember from college that we used acetone for everything, but using alcohol, like ethanol.
Yeah, acetone is not a good thing to spray. I think alcohol will be okay, but I think those wipes, if you can get those Clorox wipes or those kind of disinfectant wipes, that will be adequate, I think. So I think that's what we were told, that we will be supplied. I haven't gone in the lab lately to check because I have enough lab techs over there. I am one of those high risk category people, so I haven't been going in. I do everything remotely. So I rely on my lab techs and faculty to watch. So one of them found out his classroom cannot hold the 18 that he has. So those are things I had to deal with now. So it's okay. We'll manage.
Are you doing fewer labs this semester?
They will do fewer face-to-face labs. So the other ones will be remote. So the remote labs will use what we are going to order for chem. We are going to order Beyond Lab Z, which is a simulation software. I will type that in here.
Is there a safety issue if we make individual spray bottles for the students of an ethanol solution?
I may have to ask somebody about that. I don't know. I can ask my safety officer for her opinion, but I don't know if that's going to work. Yeah, that will be allowed. But
If
yeah,
you're
I don't
using
know.
burners, that sounds like a really bad idea to me.
Yeah, if you are using Bunsen burners, I wouldn't do that. Yeah.
Well, we don't have enough Bunsen burners for giving the kids their own or every other student, so we probably aren't going to do anything with flames this year.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. One of the things I did since I came to Fitchburg is pretty much get rid of Bunsen burner. So we don't have them anymore. Apparently, there are some alcohol lamps or things that are not so dangerous. Yesterday, somebody was demonstrating. I think Mark, Kathy, somebody was.
I didn't see that.
That little lamp, which is like a Bunsen burner, but it's a propane triggered handheld Bunsen. I mean, if you cannot even call it a Bunsen burner. It's a real tiny one, about 3 inches long, and you shut it off. You turn it on, shut it off.
We pretty much use heaters and stirrers.
Yeah, that's what I do. I've got hot plates for all my students. I made the department spend the money on that.
Now our school, I was just double checking here. We have to use school approved disinfecting, so we can't. I'm even wondering if they'll allow those little soap things that. But I don't know. People we're talking about.
We've got about 5 minutes till 5:15. quarter past we're gonna all get together, give away some stuff, and
Good.
you know, so if,
I heard when I logged in, some of you were talking about sodium hydroxide and soap. You don't need sodium hydroxide if they can find, if students can do this at home, if they can find ash, any kind of ash by burning wood, you put
wood
it in
ash.
water. You put it in water and let the whatever that is soluble. So any sodium hydroxide or potassium hydroxide will dissolve in the water. It's usually potassium oxide, but that will become potassium hydroxide or sodium hydroxide, and that will be enough. And then boil it with vegetable oil. You can make soap that way. Yeah. So they don't need to handle NaOH. So it's workable. And I had tried it when I was in 6th grade or 7th grade, so it's a long time ago. That was a home project for us. And we had to take the soap back to school to show everybody.
Someone asked about the document that was in the chat. If you just roll up the chat, depends when you add it. You came, but
No, I came and Denise said
Todd.
hello.
Let's see. I asked him to share that to the Google Drive. I don't know if he did, but
He did.
all right. Okay, so it was about, yeah, it was probably
2:25.
before you came. Anyway, if there's nothing else, I think we should. It's been a really interesting time talking to so many people. We have so many questions. It's unimaginable. So I know we always get through it, but it seems harder than usual.
So Kathy, is there any plan to get together again in another month or two to kind of share some best practices?
Well,
that might be useful.
Well, I know that Sue Clemmer is planning a thing called Chem Chat. And let's see if I can find the date.
Yeah, she has 2 of them planned for fall.
Yeah, she's got one on 8/27 and one on 9/10. So these are 1-hour Zoom sessions. And I think they're going to be, and then one on October 1st. So I know other people.
8/27 and October.
Yeah, September 10th and October 1st.
Okay, is that available through the NEACT website?
I would think so. They'll be advertised on the website. And also I'm going to share with the other organizers about the fact that people really want to be able to maybe just chat informally in some way. And I don't know how that could happen, but I'm sure that we can find something. Since everyone's a member, they have access to all the stuff on the website. So,
and I'm sure this will show up on the calendar pretty soon.
Yes.
Yeah, we can only put one thing at a time on the calendar, I think, or will pop up in the front.
I don't know. know. But anyway, so if not, you can email Kristen, Chris, and they will have that information. So anyway, I'm going to end the session now, and thank you so much. Please join us in the closing remarks. Okay.
Thank you.
Back at the coffee house.
Great to see you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great. Nice to see you, Mel. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.